Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we will be learning today, Minchah and Hashem, Daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. So we're going to conclude what I have found to be a most fascinating Siman Daled, Hilchos Netillas Yadayim. We pick up on the bottom of Yud Amid Beis, Siman Daled, Sif Chaf Beis. Says the Mechaber, Imein Loi Mayim. So you get up in the morning and you have to wash the Netillas Yadayim. Now let's remember, we learned two primary reasons from the Rishonim, the Rosh and the Rashba, why we have to wash the Netillas Yadayim in the morning. The Rosh says, while we sleep, Yadayim Askani Yisheim, our hands are very busy. They may come into contact with a part of the body that is unclean. Therefore, before we come to be Mekabel Al Malchus Shabayim with Kriya Shema, or to stand before the Rabbeinu Shalom in Tefillah, we need to wash our hands. The Rashba said that when we awake in the morning with Nasa Kibriya Chadasha, we are recreated. Chadashim labekarim rabbe emunasecha. We are refreshed, renewed, recreated. We're Nasa Kibriya Chadasha, and now we have to wash our hands like a kohen going to do the avodah. Again, that seems to be preparatory, certainly to tefillah, that we're coming to serve the Rabbeinu Shalom for a new day. We have to wash our hands like a kohen washes his hands before he does the avodah from the kiyar, and the Chazal were masakin a bracha on this netilah, both according to the Rosh and the Rashba. And then we had reason number 3, which is to the need to remove the ruach hara from our hands when we wake up in the morning and we saw a suffix. Is it sleeping that causes a ruach hara to descend on our hands? Is it the fact that we were sleeping and we entrusted our neshama to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and while the neshama was, so to speak, at least partially out of the guf, now a ruach tumah came in? Is the sleeping the geirim what causes the ruach hara to come onto our hands? Or is it perhaps Laila, night? We know night is always a euphemism. Darkness, night, is always a euphemism for tumah, for bad things, for galus. So it could be that Laila is geirim the ruach hara, but in any case, in the morning we have a ruach hara on our hands and we have to wash 3 times in order to remove the ruach hara. Well, what happens if you get up in the morning and you don't have access to water? You know, you're in your off-the-grid cabin out in the woods, and the well is not working, and you don't have any water. What do? Says the Mechaber, if you do not have access to water, Yekaneach Yadav Bitzroyer, you should cleanse your hands using pebbles. So if you have stones, you could wipe your hands on these stones. Oy ba'afar, or with earth. Now, a lot of people in 2022, United States of America, they look at this, they say, clean your hands with dirt. Isn't that a little bit of an oxymoron? How do you clean your hands with dirt? Well, the truth is that dirt is a very effective cleansing agent. The dirt is actually an abrasive. Dry dirt, it's grit. It's an abrasive, and you could use it to really clean yourself. The truth is, what do you think animals do? I have had several times over the years, we've raised chickens, and chickens take dust baths. They find themselves a place in the yard that they like, and they lay down and they use their feet to scratch out all of the grass and scratch up the dirt, and they make a depression in the dirt, and then they get in there and they work the dirt into their feathers and into their bodies. And then when they finally come out, they love it. They can stay in there for 15 minutes, sending dust and dirt flying all over the place. And then when they come out, they shake themselves off. And the reason they do this is to keep themselves clean. So the Mechaber says, if you don't have access to water, Yekaneach Yadav, clean your hands, Bitzrar, either using pebbles, Ay ba'afar, or with earth, Ay b'chal midei demenake, or using anything else. We're going to see, maybe you have a dry towel. Maybe you're standing by the table in the Bismedrish and it's a wooden table and you could rub your hands on the table. So you could cleanse your hands using any midi de menake, anything that is capable of cleaning the hands. Via varech, and you make a bracha not al Netillas Yadayim, because Netillas Yadayim is washing the hands. Rather, you make a bracha al Nikiyos Yadayim, on cleansing the hands. V'yoyel l'tfila, and this use of a davar, of a midi de menake, this cleaning of your hands using pebbles or earth or something else is effective to allow you to say Kriya Shema and to daven. Aval loy laha'avir rach rasha alein, but it is not going to remove the rach ra. In order to remove the rach ra, you're still going to have to wash your hands with water 3 times. So if you're in this situation and you did use a midi demenake, some sort of cleansing agent on your hand other than mayim, in order to prepare yourself for Kriya Shema and Tefillah, you have to remember that later on when you get access to water, you should certainly, as soon as possible, wash your hands 3 times with water in order to take off the rach ra. And prior to washing your hands to remove the rach ra, you should take care not to touch any of the parts of the body that we spoke about where the rach ra could bring harm to the body. You should make sure not to touch your mouth, your ears, your nose, your eyes, any of the other openings of the body. You should try not to touch food, etc., etc. Says the Mishnah Berurah back here on Yod Amid Beis, Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Nun Hey. Im Ein, if you don't have water, so you should use something else. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Vim Yesh Loimayim. When you do have access to water, Chavetz Chaim points out a halacha that we haven't really mentioned here so far. Tzarich litail afilu l'tfilas mincha va'arvis. Chavetz Chaim tells us that when you do have access to water, you have to wash your hands before davening mincha and before davening maariv. Even if you are not aware that your hands are dirty in any way, or that you touched a makom mechusa on your guf. So, as far as you know, your hands are perfectly clean. They're physically clean. And as far as you know, they're also clean. You don't recall having touched and uncovered a makom metunif of the body. So your hands are then what we would call stam yodayim. Still in all, says the Mishnah Berurah here, that we've been discussing this whole Siman. Washing Netillas Yadayim in preparation for davening in the morning. And over there we said you actually have a bracha. Says the Chavetz Chaim here now, he introduces us now to the halacha that when you have access to water, you should wash your hands before Minchah and before Maariv as well. But that Netillas Yadayim is done without a bracha. Because Chazal were only masakin a bracha of Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvahs of Tzivanu on Netillas Yadayim, on Netillas Yadayim shel Shachris, not on Netillas Yadayim later on. V'chedeisa b'Siman Zayin Sif Aleph, like we are going to say later in Siman Zayin Sif Aleph. Now, over there is a Taz, and the Taz, well, really there's 2 things we should mention. First of all, why are you washing your hands for Minchah and Maariv if as far as you know your hands are clean? It's based on a pasuk. The pasuk says, David HaMelech says, Erechas b'nikayin kapai, I will wash my hands in cleanliness, v'asoivava es mizbechacha Hashem, and I will surround your mizbeach, Rabbeinu Shalom. Now we know that our tefillah stands in the place of the avodah, u'nishalma parim svasenu. It's our tefillah, our Shemona Esrei, our davening. That's in the place of the kavvanos that we unfortunately cannot bring because we don't have the Beis Hamikdash she'yibane b'mehera v'yameinu. So, erchatz b'nikayin kapai, before Hashem, before we come to tefillah, we have to wash our hands. So we have to wash our hands not only in the morning for davening, but we also have to wash our hands for Minchah and for Maariv before davening. But the Mishnah Berurah says, Minchah and Maariv, there's no bracha. Why not? So he sends us to Siman Zayin Sif Aleph. Over there is a Taz, and the Taz says, and I'll quote the Taz says, the dafka b'shachar, only in the morning, tiknu kain kaidam atfila, it's only in the morning that the Chazal were masakin washing with a bracha before davening. Mishum deroiv pa'amim yadav naga b'makayim metunif. Because in the morning, it's not really that our hands are stam yodayim. Our hands are not stam yodayim in the morning. What did the Rosh say? The Rosh said Yodayim Askani Yoseim. Let's quote the Mishnah Berurah from back at the beginning of the Siman. The Mishnah Berurah brought down from the Rosh. Sheyadayim shel Adam Askani Yoseim. The hands are busy The efsher, it's impossible, shelo yiga b'basar matunaf balayla, that your hands did not come into contact with an unclean part of the body during the night. So in the morning, says the Taz, over there's a real absolute bona fide need to wash the hands, because the hands are not considered stam yadayim. And this is something that occurs every single morning and every single night. When you go to sleep, it's like efsher, it's inevitable that your hands are not going to come into contact with the Malkum Matunif. And therefore, Chazal wa Masakin, that on the Netillas Yadayim shel Shachris, you make a bracha. The Netillas Yadayim by Minchah and Maariv, even if you happen to know for a fact that your hands touched the Malkum Machusa, you used the Beis HaKisei right before Mincha, so you know your hands are dirty. Still, you wash the Netillas Yadayim without a bracha. Why? Because it's not inevitable that every single day before Mincha and before Maariv, your hands are going to be matunif. And therefore, yes, you have to wash your hands, but you don't make a bracha. Masha'enkein by Shachris, it's inevitable that your hands are not unclean. Your hands are definitely unclean. And therefore, in the morning, Chazal wa masakin a bracha. That's according to the Rosh. According to the Rashba, the Taz says, it's very good why there's only a bracha in the morning, because in the morning, that's the only time you have the issue of Nasa Kibriya Chadasha. Before Mincha and Maariv, you don't have the issue of Nasa Kibriya Chadasha. So why do you wash your hands before Mincha and Maariv? So this is a halacha that I think a lot of people are not really aware of. A lot of people think it's a nice thing to wash your hands before Mincha and Maariv, but they don't realize that the Mishnah Berurah brings down over here, and he uses the lashon of tzarich. V'im yesh mayim tzarich litoil afilu l'tfilas mincha and Maariv. You have to wash, and he brings this down. This is a mechaber, I believe it is, in Siman Reish Lamed Gimel. Just check quickly. I think it's a mechaber in Reish Lamed Gimel. Yes, Reish Lamed Gimel, Hilchos Netillas Mincha, Reish Lamed Gimel Sif Beis, says the Mechaber, Im yesh lo mayim, if you have access to water, tzarech lital yadav kidei lihispalel. You have to wash your hands in order to daven, af al pi she'enu yedei lahem shum lichloch. Even if you're not aware that your hands are unclean in any way, v'lo yivarech, however, you do not make a bracha of al Netillas Yadayim, and he brings this down from the Torah. So it's an often a halacha. You have to wash your hands for Mincha and Maariv. Okay. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here, is cut nun hey. V'im ein loy mayim, if you do not have access to water by Mincha and Maariv. Yeshayim, remember, there are those that say the dinai kahacha, that the same halacha applies, that the same halacha that we're learning here about Netillas Yadayim in the morning, that if you don't have access to water, you should use a midi de menake, so too by Mincha and Maariv. If you don't have access to water, you use a midi de menake. The dinai kahacha, the yanake b'chol midi de menake. Pen mudbuk to make sure that the hands are good and clean before davening. He also tells us to look in Siman Tzadik Beis. What does the Mishnah Berurah say in Siman Tzadik Beis? Over there he's talking about somebody who washed Netillas Yadayim shel Shachris, but then he was up for 2 hours before he went to daven Shachris. So the Mishnah Berurah over there says that person has the same halacha as somebody who needs to wash for Mincha and Maariv. So you got up in the morning, you washed Netillas Yadayim, but now it's an hour or two before you daven Shachris, and you want to go daven. So you need to wash your hands the same way you need to wash your hands before Mincha and Maariv. Uber Reish Lamed Gimel, and he also sends us to Reish Lamed Gimel, Mishnah Berurah, where we discuss this halacha as well. Is cut nun vav yikanech yadav, you should cleanse your hands. Va'afilu hayu mechlachim bevadai. This eitzah, that if you don't have access to water, you could use a midi de menake, says the Mishnah Berurah, this eitzah works even if you know for sure that your hands are unclean. Va'afilu hayu melochlachim bevadai. Even if you know for certain that your hands are unclean. Kigayin she'asa tzracha v'kinach. For instance, you went to the Beis HaKisei gedolim and you cleaned yourself, so you know that you touched a makom matunif in the body. You may have even come into contact with tzaya. Gam kein mahani. If you don't have access to water, you could still use a midi de menake like tzrar or afar, and that cleaning of your hands will allow you to daven. When we get up to Siman Tzadik Beis, we will see when you don't have access to water, how far are you mechuyev to travel in order to get water? You'd be surprised. We're going to learn over there that you have to travel quite a distance in certain cases in order to have access to water, even as much as 2.5 miles in order to get access to water before davening. The Mechaber suggested cleaning your hands with earth, or you could use a dry garment. That's also considered a midi de menake. Vedan, you should know, says the Chofetz Chaim, the nikoyin, when we speak about cleaning the hands with the midi de menake, other than with mayim, kevan shu oimid b'mkoim mayim, since the cleaning that you're doing with the midi de menake stands in the place of washing your hands with water, sarach lenakois kolayad, you have to wash the entire hand. The same way when you use water, you have to wash the entire hand ad haperek until the wrist. So too, when you use a midi de menake, you have to wipe the entire hand up until the wrist. So tzarech l'nakeis kalayad bein gabay, you have to wash the back of the hand. Bein toichai, the palm, ad haperek, all the way until the wrist. Ubediyeved, and in a bediyeved situation, dayat seif kishretz ba'osav, it would be enough until the knuckles. But not the way some people comport themselves, that they just take the fingertips and they wipe the fingertips. That would not be sufficient. The Mechaber said that when you use a midi de menake instead of mayim, you don't make a bracha of al Netillas Yadayim, you make a bracha of al Nikius Yadayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, there are those who disagree. This is brought down in the Shar Tzion from the Gra, and it's mashma that way, he says, from the Magen Avram. Some say that you still make a bracha of al Netillas Yadayim. However, when we come up, nevertheless, kol ha'achrayim lo yizazim mipsaka shulchan aruch. The Chofetz Chaim says that the achrayim, he says kol ha'achrayim, all the achrayim seem to follow the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, that when you use the midi de menake, you make a bracha of al nikios yadayim, not al netilos yadayim. Finally, we come to the final sif katan of Siman Daled, sif katan chav gimel. Says the Mechaber, Loi tiknu netilos yadayim elo lekriya shema v'letfila. This takana of netilos yadayim, you must wash your hands, that was instituted in preparation for Kriya Shema and for Tefillah. Aval, however, Barachos de Shachris, you want to say the Berachas HaShachar, Yachal Levarech Kaidim Netila. You're allowed to say the Berachas HaShachar, even though you're going to say the shame. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. You're going to say the shame, but you're allowed to recite Berachas HaShachar before Netilas Yadayim. This that you must wash the Netilas Yadayim first is a halacha, says the Mechaber, that's specific to Kriya Shema and Tefillah. Ella im kain hu yashen al mitasai aroin, unless you were sleeping in bed unclothed. She'oz asar la'askos Hashem ad she'yanaka isam. In that case, you're not allowed to say the shame of Hashem at all until you wash the Netilas Yadayim, or he doesn't say that. He says, Ad sheyanaka isam, until you cleanse your hands. What's at work over here? So what seems to be at work is, the Mechaber is saying that if you went to sleep and you were clothed, and from the Mishnah Berurah, it would seem that the Mechaber means that you were really clothed. You were clothed in a way that the parts of your body that are typically uncovered are covered. In that case, your hands have a din of stam yodayim. If your hands are stam yodayim, you're allowed to say the Shem Hashem without Netilas Yadayim. You're allowed to make a bracha without Netilas Yadayim, because it's not absolutely for certain that you touched a makom metunef. It's possible that you did not touch a makom metunef. And therefore, we're not going to say that you're not allowed to even recite a bracha without washing Netillas Yadayim. Kriya Shema, Tefillah, that you're not allowed to do without Netillas Yadayim. But Birkas HaShachar, with Stam Yadayim, you're allowed to say Birkas HaShachar without washing Netillas Yadayim. However, if you were sleeping unclothed, then, like the Rosh said, it's efshir. It's inevitable that your hands came into contact with a makom atunif, and if your hands came into contact with a makom atunif, then you cannot even say a bracha, or we'll see learn Torah, or anything else without first cleansing your hands. Let's take a look at this in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut nuntes. Kaidem Netila. The Mechaber said, Netillas Yadayim, that's a requirement specifically for Kriya Shema and Tefillah. Birkas HaShachar, you could recite Birkas HaShachar before Netillas Yadayim, Kaidem Netila, is cut nuntes. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Why? Why is this? Because the Stam Yadayim, Tahainu she'eni yadeya imheim ha'mochlachim, where we don't know for certain that the hands are unclean, einon pesulais labracha. Those hands are not puzzle. Those hands do not disallow you from making a bracha. Stam Yadayim are not pesulais labracha. They're not something that disallows you from making a bracha. V'choshken l'divrei Torah. Certainly they don't prevent you from reciting or learning divrei Torah. Think about it. You're allowed to go take a cup of water and make a shahakal. It doesn't say anywhere you have to wash Netillas Yadayim without making a shahakal. I'm sorry. It doesn't say anywhere that you're not allowed to make a shahakal without Netillas Yadayim. Why? At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you want to go take a drink. Your hands are stam yadayim, right? We said for mincha you have to wash your hands. Why? Because your hands are stam yadayim. You don't know for certain that your hands are unclean, but before you daven mincha you have to wash your hands because you have stam yadayim. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I go to the water cooler and I want to take a drink. I want to make a shahakal. I have stam yadayim. Do you have to wash your hands? No. It doesn't say anywhere you have to wash your hands. So stam yadayim are not puzzle for making a bracha. And if you went to sleep and you wake up in the morning and you were clothed when you slept, your hands are stam yadayim. So they're not puzzle for a bracha. However, if you slept araim, if you slept unclothed, then the halach is different. If you slept while you're unclothed, then the stam position, the default position, is you probably did touch a makom atunif. You probably did come into contact with an unclean part of the body, and therefore your hands are not stam yadayim. Your hands are considered melochlachim, and then they're puzzle even for a bracha. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, how about us? By us, I mean people who, let's say, wear pajamas, right? Which is very common nowadays. But what are pajamas? Pajamas are loose. Pajamas are open. Pajamas have much more open necks than a shirt does. Maybe they're short. So, says the Mishnah Berurah, Malbushim Shalanu, our types of pajamas, Shabeis Atzavar Pasuach, where the neck opening is very open, Afiluim Yashen B'Malbushim, even if you sleep in some kind of a malbush, Mistama Yadam Tunafais, we're going to give you the din of somebody who sleeps unclothed. Because again, we're going to assume that you touched a makom achusa, because it is the way of the hands, Yadayim Askani, I say, that while you're sleeping, you're going to scratch yourself b'mkaim zeya, in places that normally have zeya. However, this is only if you slept a shinas kva, sheet nishbin, if you slept at least a half hour. You took a cat nap. We don't say that we assume that you touched the makom atunif. V'dinam kistam yadayim, and then you have stam yadayim. You're allowed to learn Torah. You're allowed to make a bracha. Rak lelu tefillah, just you can't daven. So again, what are we saying over here? We're saying that the din of Netillas Yadayim, that you have to wash your hands before you could do it, say a davar shebekdusha, that's specific to Kriya Shema and Tefillah. Kriya Shema and Tefillah are on a higher level. And even if your hands are stam yodayim, you must wash your hands before Kriya Shema or Tefillah. That's why Mincha, you have to wash your hands. Maariv, you have to wash your hands. You wake up in the morning, even if you are dressed, you have to wash the Netillas Yadayim before Kriya Shema or Tefillah. Because stam yodayim are puzzle for Kriya Shema and for Tefillah. But stam yadayim are not puzzle for a bracha. You can make a shackle whenever you want during the day. Stam yadayim are not puzzle for divrei Torah. You're allowed to learn and you're allowed to recite divrei Torah at any point during the day without washing Netillas Yadayim. What's the din of our hands? So it seems from this Mishnah Berurah, if you wear pajamas, so then that's as if what the Mechaber calls you slept aroim. You slept unclothed. Your hands, when you wake up in the morning, are not considered stam yadayim. Your hands are considered vaday meluchlachim. And therefore, your hands are puzzle even for a bracha and even for divrei Torah. So you can't wake up in the morning, lean over to your night table where you have a drink, and make a shahakal and take a drink. Why? Because you have because your hands are not stam yadayim. Your hands are considered yadayim meluchlachos, and you must wash your hands first. You wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, it's very dry in the house, you want to take a drink, you got to go wash your hands first. Because your yadayim are not stam yadayim. Your yadayim are vaday meluchlachim, and you must wash your hands before you can make a bracha. Ois cut in samach aleph, sheyanak oisam, at least a pitzroy rice with pebbles, or b'chol midi de menake. You have to at least use a midi de menake. V'ho adin l'Torah asa b'loi nikayin. And the same halacha would apply for limud HaTorah. With stam yadayim, not with stam yadayim. If you slept aroim, we're going on here. If you slept aroim, so your hands are vaday meluchlachim, your hands are also with divrei Torah, b'loi nikayin. V'ayin b'prima gadim shekasav, take a look at the prima gadim who writes, ta'afilu im yesh lo mayim, even if you have access to water, mikamakam dai lebrachas l'Torah b'nikayin ba'alma, for brachas and for Torah, it's enough just nikayin ba'alma, even immediately de menake. Now this is very, very interesting. This is very interesting. Because this means, if you wake up in the middle of the night, like I just said, you woke up 3 o'clock in the morning, it's very dry, your throat is dry, you want to take a drink. You don't really want to get out of bed and go wash your hands. But you have a water bottle on your table. It would seem from here that even though your hands are vaday meluchlachim, right? Because that's what we're going on here in the Mechaber. We're going here on the point of the Mechaber when the Mechaber said, Ele imkein hu yashan amitasai aroim, so his hands are meluchlachim, right? You're allowed to use a midi de menake, even though you have access to water, according to the Prima Gadim. Afilum yesh lamayim. You have access to water. You can get out of bed and go wash your hands. You don't have to. To make a bracha or to say divrei Torah, nikayin ba'alma is enough. So that would seem to me to mean you could wake up in the middle of the night, you could take your blanket, right? That's a beged yavesh. You could take your blanket, wipe your hands well, right? Like the Mechaber said earlier, ada perek, wipe your hands well, back, front, everything, and then you can make a bracha shahakal. Now you have to be certain that you're also clothed in a way that will allow you to make a bracha. You have to have something interposing between your heart and the makom ha'erva. But if so, you could take the water bottle, you could wipe your hands, make a shahakal, and take a drink. Okay. V'chein mashma b'bir agra, v'rak mishum kidei lahav ruach hara be'inon mayim. The only time that we, strictly speaking, must have water is to remove ruach ra, because we're talking about all of these cases where you could use a midi de menake, but there's one thing that a midi de menake can never do, and that is to remove ruach ra. To remove ruach ra, midi de menake never works. The Shari Tshuva takes from the Zayar that you should never make a bracha without Netillas Yadayim first. And the Chavetz Chaim says, you know what? You should be machmir when you have access to water. Okay, that closes out Siman Daled, which to me was such a beautiful, fascinating Siman. And now we go on to Siman Hey. Siman Hey says the Mechaber kavvanos habrachas, the proper kavvanos, the proper mindset, intent, thought processes that you're supposed to have when you make a bracha by sif echad, and here we have one sif. Says the Mechaber, Yechaven bebrachas pirush hamilos. You should be certain to have in mind the taich and the meaning of the words when you make a bracha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph, Pirush Hamilus, Kamay Shamar Chazal. This is in tune with what the Chazal write. Gemara Brachas Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Shelo Yizrak HaBracha Mipiv. A person should be careful not to throw a bracha out of his mouth. That's not the way you make a bracha. Shelo Yizrak HaBracha Mipiv. Ella, rather, Yechavein Be'esa Amira. You should pay attention and you should have intent while you say the bracha. V'yavarech benachas. And you should recite the bracha slowly. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvarei. V'zeh l'shon Sefer HaChasidim Siman Men Vav. He quotes from the Sefer HaChasidim. Kishehu noitel yadav, when somebody washes his hands, oishem avarek ala peros, or he makes a bracha on a fruit, or any other brachas hanenin, oy ala mitzvahs, or he makes a brachas ha-mitzvahs, hashkuros b'fi kol adam. These are brachas that everybody is absolutely fluent in. Sha'akol niyeh b'dvarei, so it's very easy to just throw them out of your mouth. Yechavein libay, a person should be mechaven his heart. He should make sure to have in mind, to concentrate. L'shem boiroi. He should be mechaven. He should have the Rabbeinu Shalom in mind. Asher hifli chasta imay, who has done wondrous chasadim for him. V'nasan laya peros, and he gave him the water. He gave him the apple. He gave him the fruit that he's making a bracha on. Ayalechem, or the bread. Lehanes behem, to derive benefit from. Vitzivo ala mitzvahs, or if you're making a bracha from the brachas ha-mitzvahs, you should have in mind that you're thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom who is mezaki you with the mitzvah. You shouldn't act like somebody who's just doing something out of habit. And is just reciting words without any kind of thoughts having in his mind. And chas v'chalila, for this avera of just saying brachas without any thought processes, the Rabbeinu Shalom becomes very angry at Klal Yisrael. V'shalach lanu biyad Yeshaya, and he sent us a message in the person of Yeshaya Hanavi. V'amar, and the Rabbeinu Shalom said, Yan ki nigash ha'am hazeh b'fiv. Why do I punish the Klal Yisrael, chas v'chalila? Because they came close to me with their mouth, ubisvasav kibduni, and with their lips they honor me. They pay lip service. V'li b'richak mimeni, but their hearts are far from me, so they pay lip service. Right? They pay lip service, but they don't have any heart. They don't pay any attention in their mind. They have no kavvanos. That the Rabbeinu Shalom says is horrible. And he says, take a look more at the Sefer Hasidim and take a look how terrible the einish is for this avera. So the Chavetz Chaim, the Mechaber, the Chavetz Chaim are telling us what a davar chomer it is to make sure that when we recite a bracha with kavana. Take a look at a simple bracha, how much meaning there is in it. Baruch atah Hashem. Gebenched are you, Hashem. What's Hashem? We're about to see the kavana you're supposed to say when you recite the name of Hashem, Aleph Daled Nun, the Shem Adnus, that the Rabbeinu Shalom is the Adoin HaKoil. So guess what? When you make a shahakal, you're being Mekabel Ol Malch Shemayim. You say the Shem Adnus, the Rabbeinu Shalom, you acknowledge him as the Adoin HaKoil. Elokeinu. He's our God, right? Again, you're being Mekabel. I have a relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom. Elokeinu, he's my God. Shahakol niyeh b'dvarei, that everything happens through his word. What a statement that is. And a person could just throw it out of his mouth. If every time you took a cup of water to drink, you made a shahakol, right? That's the kind of shahakol you're supposed to make. Now continues the Mechaber. Kishayazker Hashem, when you mention the Shem Hashem. So sometimes when you mention the Shem Hashem, there's two different kavvanos that we have to have in mind. The Shem Hashem is sometimes written Yud K Vav K, right? The Shem Havaya. But we don't pronounce it that way. We're not allowed to say that. So we pronounce it like we're pronouncing the Shem Adnus. Now, I'm allowed to say it because it's for different Torah purposes. I'm not being Moisi Shem Shamayim Chas v'chilul v'atala. We say Adonai, right? That's the way we read it, even though that's not the way it's spelled out. So there's a duality of kavana over here. The Mishnah Berurah is going to say we have to have. when we read the Shem Hashem that's spelled Yud Kei Vav Kei, but we pronounce it Aleph Daled Nun, so we have to have kavana for both. Says the Mechaber, Yechaven Pirish Kriyasai Ba'adnus, we have to have kavana for the way we read it, right? The Shem Aleph Daled Nun, the Shem Adnus, Shehu Adoin HaKoil. The kavana that we have to have is that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Adoin HaKoil. He's the master of all, the master of everything. V'yechaven b'ksivasai, but we also have to have kavana for the way the Shem is written. Yud Kei Vav Kei. So we have to have that kavana in mind as well. What is that kavana? Shahaya v'hoive v'yeh. The kavana that was supposed to attach to the Shem Havaya is Haya hoive v'yeh. That the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one who Haya, he was, Hoive, he is, v'yeh, and he will be. That's an unbelievable kavana, by the way. Realize that when we think of the Rebbeinu Shalom, right, the Rebbeinu Shalom knows everything that has transpired from the beginning of the world till now. He knows all the history, right? He knows everything that's going on right now. And he knows everything that's coming in the future. So whatever sorrow or whatever problem we look at in the world, and we turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom, realize that we're turning to the Rebbeinu Shalom's Haya Hoive v'yeh. You know, you look at this crisis going on in Ukraine with Russia, right? We look at it in a very narrow perspective. We look at it exactly what's happening now. But the Rebbeinu Shalom is Haya Hoive v'yeh. The Rebbeinu Shalom has a mindset of what's coming in the future. The Rebbeinu Shalom also has the mindset of everything that happened in the past in that part of the world, right? And the Rebbeinu Shalom is aware of every last minute detail of exactly what's going on right now. There's nothing that's hidden. So that's Haya Hoive v'yeh. So, says the Mechaber, we have to have this dual kavana. Yechaven Pirish Kriyasa, we have to have kavana for the way we read it, Ba'adnus, Shu Adain HaKoil. V'yechaven B'ksivasa, we also have to have kavana for the way it's written, B'yod Kei, Shaya v'yeh. Uba'askirei Elokim, and when we mention the Shem of Hashem of Elokeinu, right? Yechaven, we have to have kavana, Shehu Takif, that he's powerful, Bal HaYecholis u'Bal HaKoichos Kulam, the one that is all capable, all powerful, Bal HaKoichos Kulam. All of the koichos of the world are his. Says the Mishnah Berurah. It's cut and base. Kriyasei ba'adnus, we have to have kavana for the way we read the Shem Hashem, right? The Shem Adnus. Ki Hashem hanichbad v'hanoira, because the Shem of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem hanichbad v'hanoira, also l'kreisei kiksavai. We're not allowed to read it the way it's written. Chazal, like the Chazal say in Masechta Sanhedrin, if somebody would pronounce the Shem Hashem the way it's written, Yud Kei Vav Kei, ein lechelik lo'olam haba. That's the way we read the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. The gam b'nekudas Aleph Daled Nun Yud, begam b'nekudas Adonai. That's the way we read it. Dahainu ha'alef b'chatav patach. The Aleph has a chatav patach on it. Now the difference between a chatav patach and a patach is how much you emphasize the a. It's not ado. It's ado. It's a little faster. You don't put such an emphasis on the patach. Avaloi b'patach levad, oy b'shva levad. But we have to have a patach. We can't. It's not aduna. It's not with a shva. V'hadalid b'cholam doi. The dalit has a cholam. V'hanun b'kamitz noi, not nai. It's a kamitz. V'yadgish hayud. Make sure that you pronounce the final yud well. Noi. Shetei nikeres yafeh. Rak b'kavana yechavel l'shem havaya. But we never pronounce the Shem Havaya. That we only acknowledge b'kavana. Haya hoive v'yeh. V'tam hanigina hu melara. And we put the emphasis on the final syllable of the word, noi. It's not ado. It's ado noi. The emphasis goes melara on the final syllable of the word. Ois Katan Gimel, the kavana that we have for Yud Kei Vav Kei is Haya hoive v'yeh. U'bebiyar agra kasav, the Gra writes, the Lefi Oimek Adin, according to the Ikar Adin, Ein Sark Lechavin Ela Perish Kriyasei. The Mechaber is telling us over here that we should have a dual kavana. Whenever the Shem is spelled Yud Kei Vav Kei and we read it Ado, we should have the dual kavana. We should have kavana for the way it's written, Haya Hoive v'yeh, we should also have kavanah for the way we say it, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Says the Gra, strictly speaking, Me'ikar Adin, this is like any other Kri and Ksiv in the Torah Kedosha, we were only mechuyev to have kavanah for the way we read it, not the way it's spelled. To b'chol makom holchan achar kriya, av sheyesh ba ksiv asoides gedolos. Levad b'kriya shema, with the exception of kriya shema, shesham tzarich lechavin gam kein shehaya hoy v'yeh. By kriya shema, we absolutely must have kavanah of haya hoy v'yeh. Of a makom shenichtav ba'alef daled. How about when the shame is actually written aleph daled? It's not even written Yud Kei Vav Kei. L'kulei alma ein tzarich lechavin ela shu adon hakoil. Then everybody agrees we only have to have the kavanah of the shem adnus, which is that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the adon hakoil. Im echad misaper chaster Hashem she'asaloi. Somebody is speaking, and he's talking. He's about to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for chasadim that the Rebbeinu Shalom did to him. And he uses the name of Hashem, which technically he's allowed to, because he's not being Moisi Shem Shamayim Levatala. So he wants to say, Ado Noi did this tremendous kindness for me. Says the Chavetz Chaim, an interesting halacha. If that happens, Umitkila Masker Hashem, and this person is about to speak, and he already said the Shem Hashem, but he hasn't gone further yet. V'roitza ligmar dvar v'asha asal Hashem, and he's about to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for what the Rebbeinu Shalom did for him. Asar lahafsikoi b'dvarim. Make sure you don't interrupt him. So this guy was about to bench the Rebbeinu Shalom for saving him from a car crash. So he says, Baruch atah Hashem, and he says the Rebbeinu Shalom's name, and he's about to say, who saved me from a car crash. And he says, gebenched is Hashem, and he says the name of Hashem, but he didn't yet say who saved me from a car crash. And now you go over to him and you say, excuse me, what time is it? Don't do that. You know why? Because now maybe he'll never get around to saying the rest of what he wanted to say. Instead, he'll get into a conversation with you. And now it'll turn out that he was Moisi Shem Shamayim Levatala. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Umetkila Masker Hashem, he said Hashem's name, V'roitza ligmar dvar v'achas alei Hashem, and he's about to recite the kindness that the Rebbeinu Shalom did for him. Asar lavsika b'dvarim, don't interrupt him. Because Shema mitoch kach, maybe because you'll interrupt him, lo yigmar dvarav, he will not complete what he was going to say. V'nimtza sheizker Shem Shamayim b'chinam. Now it will come out that he said the Shem Shamayim for nothing, which is a terrible avera. Lo yisei Shem Hashem lashav. Avalim roitza lekalel Shem Adam. But let's say chas v'chalila, you encounter somebody who's about to curse somebody using the name of Hashem, chas v'chalila, which is terrible avera. V'hiskel b'Hashem, and he said the name of Hashem, mitzvah lavsika. Then it's a mitzvah to interrupt him, shelo yigmar dvar v'layechta, so that he should not finish what he was going to do. He's going to say the Shem Shamayim Levatala. That you're not going to be able to save him from. But it's another avera to curse somebody using the name of Hashem. So interrupt him so you shouldn't finish the curse. And he brings this down from the Sefer Chasidim, V'huva b'chidushay Rabbi Akiva Eger. So we'll stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Vav. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The source of Limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua for us, Parnasset Sheduklim to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see the BSKL Tzedek, B'mher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.